Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about development of websites. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how long does website development usually take? It depends a lot on the size of the website that you're going to build. So for example, if you're going to make yourself like one of those personal websites type of thing, which is basically one page. There are no like fancy links or any type of like comment sections or anything like that. It's just information and some styling and images maybe. Then again, depending on who you're going to have make that thing for you, it can be done in a few hours. Perhaps. I mean, you mean if you really want to stretch it and do like the bare minimum, I mean, I can probably get a Hello World website done in a few minutes because it's not that sophisticated, right? However, for larger systems, and that's where it gets a bit tricky for people to sort of figure out what the time scales, because you will, if you work as a software developer, know that one of the most dreaded things in our industry is time estimations. And I'm pretty sure that that's not just us, but it's something that is very telling for software developers, that they're sort of a little bit careful with saying how long something's going to take and so forth, because a website is sophisticated depending on what you want it to be able to do. Like, for example, if you take this personal website I was talking about and you compare the time it would take you to ship that to how it would take to ship just one page from, say, YouTube or like Facebook or some, like, it doesn't matter which page it is. And if you think about all the functionality that you have there, which is like comment sections and the information that you're showing and things like that, because all that data, it comes from somewhere. And that means that we have backend systems, and those backend systems, they are like, it's hard for most people who don't work as software developers to understand that, that single website that you see, the information that you have, like for example, when you go to Amazon and you see a list of all the products that you're going to buy, it's hard for people to understand that there's millions and millions and millions going into developing that, because the data that is coming from an ecosystem of different services and systems and so forth and so forth. And so to ship a feature on, like to ship that website, can potentially take quite some time. Now, usually you don't think in terms of like a whole website sort of thing when you work with larger systems like I do, for example, because those sort of like it would be impossible. If you were to ask me, and it's actually happened to me, I had a friend who more or less asked me to build Facebook for him, and like I still remember it to this day, and he felt that the appropriate compensation for building something quote unquote sort of like Facebook was a pizza, or possibly two, because in his mind the challenge that I faced was roughly the same thing that we do when we borrow our friends to carry our stuff when we're moving apartments or something like that. And it was only when I explained to him that sure, I can give you, like, if you give me a pizza an hour or something, like I was just making a joke for him, to it, then I'm pretty sure we're going to be up in a few hundred pizzas. And we both agreed that that's simply too much pizza. But that is the truth. The reality is that shipping a single component on a sophisticated system with like tons and tons of data can take hours. Some people, like some products, are developed over months and years in some cases. The average time, usually the way we software developers do work, is that we don't ship like a whole website, as at the first, like, we don't really talk in those terms. We talk about features on the website. So the first version of an application might take a few months to develop. That is pretty common, that it depending on how sophisticated the system is. And another thing that is a little bit not just coding related, but also something that people forget, is that the code is absolutely one of the things that takes quite a bit of time to write, but getting the specifications, as talking to the people who want the system, like the website to be built, and making sure that they have a good understanding of what they want, because we, the software developers, we can't build much if you don't know how it works, or rather how you want it to work. And that is a whole thing in of itself, and like product management and time estimates and stuff like that, right? But so on average, you don't ship like a whole thing. but you ship a feature on it, and that can vary depending on the size. It can vary from common, I would say, is we actually do something we call estimations, which is like agile work practices and stuff like that. And so usually what we do is that we estimate how long a specific piece of work is going to take. So usually that's going to be 1 day, 3 days. We have like estimation bingos type of things that we do sometimes, and like up to 5 days or so forth. And then we basically measure in days. And it's very common for, depending on the team, to ship something new, like a feature or an update or bug fix or something like that, for like maybe once a day, once a week, every other 2 weeks. And for teams that have like a lot of legacy or like problems with their system, or a lot of very like extensive process, they ship a few times a year, depending on, you know, their circumstances. But that's the ranges I usually see. And when you build like a website from scratch, that's the really main question you should ask yourself. If you're building a system from scratch, what type of functionality is going to have? Because as I said, in an easy situation, it's going to take a few minutes, like a few days, like it's not going to be much of an investment. For something more sophisticated, especially when you do like integrations, or if you're dealing with like data persistence and databases and stuff like that, you start to add more complexity, and then the time estimate is going to go up until, depending on the scope of something. That's why we developers try to get people to understand that we can't estimate something as, well, my friend, like how long would it take you to build Facebook? It would be impossible, because there's thousands and thousands of features. Like I can't figure that out. So we try to think in terms of, okay, can we ship a smaller project, like a first draft, an MVP or something like that? Because the less we have to ship, the easier is to, of course, for us to estimate how long is that going to take. So what I want you to take away from this is that developing a website, usually, if it's a static website with just some content, then like it can take, I mean, you can get ChatGPT or Copilot or something like to build that in seconds. So like that's easy. It's not not so complicated to get something like that off the ground. So it's the same thing with WordPress or anything like that. These solutions are great if you just want something onto the web, and then you don't have to worry that it's going to take forever. The sort of work that I do and my coworkers, we usually build larger systems, the sort of systems that you are using every day, like, you know, YouTube, Facebook, Google search engine, and like these more like almost enterprise product level websites that are much more sophisticated than, you know, an average personal website. And in those sort of situations, the whole development, like you can't estimate how long it would take to build one. Like if you were to ask me how long would it take to build YouTube, that would be basically impossible to answer. It's something that the scope is way too big. It's much too complicated to say something like that. But if you told me like we're gonna build a simple version of it, then I might be able to estimate it. And based on my experiences, usually companies ship a first draft of something in a few weeks, few months, and sometimes I've seen things take up to a year or something like to get like a first version of an application, depending on the complexity. And then from then on, you usually don't think in terms of building like entire new websites. You talk about functionality within the system, and that is a like whole different section of videos, how to estimate that sort of stuff. But on average, a software team working today, based on my experiences at the very least, they ship new functionality once a day, once a week, every 2 weeks, or in some cases more than that, like a few times, like a quarter or something like that. So it ranges very much to how long building a website takes, depending on like how big is the website. Have a great day.